Hello there. On this week's Data Radio Show, we're doing a clip episode where we're going to take a look back at some of the best advice we've been given from our interviewed guests in the past. So, come and join me for this week's show. Welcome to this week's episode of the Data Radio Show. One of the aims for this particular series was to try and create a resource for people that they can look at and go, oh yeah, that's good advice, get a bit of information from people and hear from people who've worked within the industry. So today I decided to do something a little bit different, and we're doing a bit of a clip show where we take a look at some of the best bits of advice from past guests to give you kind of a overall look at some of the things that are consistent with how their careers have evolved, but also to give you some inspiration if you're just starting out on your career journey as to the sort of things that you might want to look into doing. So let's jump into some clips and see what sort of advice we can mine from some of the experts that we've had the honour of working with. Right, first up we have Christoph Weinzettit, who is the CEO of Scalefree based in Europe. He's got a bit of an accounting background, so it's a little bit different to the world of data, but he brings an interesting perspective on that. And he wanted to highlight specifically how different skill sets can actually help people out in different parts of different organizations. So let's see what his advice is.
All right. I mean, it's a different company, but yeah. I think actually, obviously I say that as I'm coming from accounting myself, but I think to have someone focus on finance also, so the finance and accounting and controlling, those people in general, I think are good fit in a leadership, because doesn't matter how good your ideas are, if you're on a run out of money, you fail, right? So especially in early phases of a company, I think it was really good that they focused a lot on just making sure the company invests wisely and grows enough with the finance we have in the background, and that worked really well. So I think it's a good combination to have both, right? In your leadership, you usually need the visionary in the beginning who's really focused on the product. For us, it was Mike. It still is Mike. And I came in and took care of the boring stuff, but important stuff as well. Yeah.
When it comes to building any kind of data architecture, it's really interesting to see what some of the problems can be around data quality, which was the advice that came from Data Vault builder Mark Winkelmann.
Handling with data, I would say maybe data quality. So this is really annoying when data quality is not good, especially on key level, because what we do in the data vault world, so one big objective is to integrate the data from a lot of systems by business terminology, by business keys. And when they're not good set up, so that you have to take a lot of effort in finding the correct keys or mapping the keys and so on, this can also be really annoying. Yeah.
Peter Bellis is the CEO of Data Vault Builder, also based in Europe. And he's got a really fascinating way of looking at how you approach any kind of architecture build. Here's his advice about knowing the problem that you're trying to solve.
I think the problem that we are trying to solve is not just like building a data vault. Yes, the product is built around data vault, but it's about solving a business problem. So usually what we start with is starting with a business model, bringing in the business people. And that's when I started in data warehousing in 2000. What we tried always to do with Power Design, with Irving, we created a lot of data models. And then it failed because we handed over this like models over to the developers. It took months until they returned. Our business user already wrote their own solutions in Excel, and they never understood what the data engineers did. And everybody was angry at everybody because it took for ages and it was expensive. And we tried to solve this issue. And we tried to take now this business model and automate everything around it. Yes, in the core, we create a data vault for querying the data. We create like dimensional models, flat tables, whatever you need. And as well, there is a lot of complexity that many people don't understand around data integration, data warehousing. That is like you need several environments, you need to have development, testing, production, you need to maybe have sandboxing today with agile approaches, and managing all these environments, deploying the code, testing it, bringing it to operations. there are so many steps involved that you needed a lot of tools earlier. And we're bringing all of these tools into one platform to make it simpler. And that's the basic idea.
For a lot of people working within the data industry, sometimes the question comes up as to whether or not you should be working with another organization or starting your own company focusing on the areas that you're really good at. I had a chat to Jonas de Cuesta from VoltSpeed. He's their Chief Marketing Officer, and his advice was actually a really simple piece around people looking at building their own business and how you should be looking to follow industry trends to build the business that you're looking at getting involved in.
Well, it's a bit of a funny story because actually I had an education in, we call it here in Belgium, we call it business engineering, something like that. So it's partially economics, a lot of science, exact science, and both exact and human science actually. And I did a major in finance, so I was actually bound to go work in a bank or something. And then when I started looking for a job, I stumbled across this consulting company that did data warehousing and everything that comes with it. And it kind of catched my interest. So yeah, next thing I knew, I was working for them. Had a couple of interesting projects in data warehousing, building more the downstream stuff, the presentation areas. Also did some work on reporting and dashboarding, working with like end users, business users. Had an interesting project for a while in the UK, in London. And yeah, after a while, it became clear that the consulting in which I started was investing more and more in automation to distinguish themselves from let's say other companies that had a lot more manpower and could build a lot more stuff with the amount of people that they had. So we started being smart and we started investing in automation frameworks. And then many years, let's say 5-6 years later, we ventured that into what we know as VoltSpeed today. So it's a story of about 12 years now, and pretty interesting. Yeah.
Mike Kalusik, who's CEO of Infovia, has really similar advice actually around growing your business by following industry trends.
We're a holistic data strategy development and execution company. So what that means is we come in and we'll work with our clients to not only, a lot of times they'll come and say, I need a data warehouse. And we're like, well, you need a data warehouse, but you really need to think about your whole ecosystem there. And so what we'll do is we'll work with them to put that strategy together, make sure that they're asking for enough budget, and we help them put together a roadmap so they can get from point A to point Z successfully. So not only do we help them build and architect their data warehouse, but then we'll work with them to bring in data governance, access control, managed services, making sure that their data loads on a regular basis. We're industry agnostic. We've been in oil and gas, education, finance, insurance, so on and so forth. Really, if you have data, you need Infovia is what it comes down to. We're big advocates of automation. We work with a lot of automation tools. We're big believers that if you focus, let the tool focus on the mundane stuff like sling and code, and you focus on the art of architecting your solution, you're ultimately going to be able to invest more effort into a good, solid solution than if you try to go in and just brute force code everything yourselves. Plus, we can typically build a data warehouse for a client in a fourth the time of doing it the old-fashioned brute force way. So, we've built probably close to 40 data warehouses around the world. And through that process, we've refined a lot of our best processes so that we bring that to bear with all of our clients. And currently, we're actually building a new tool in-house, leveraging AI, so that we can hyper automate that automation. So we can now take some textual input, and from that textual input around a job description or a business process, we can actually generate a data model. So it's pretty exciting what's happening in the industry.
Bronwyn Fairburn from Ignition in Australia has a really interesting outlook as the principal data consultant for Ignition. She wants you to know about the importance of data quality.
I don't know. It's kind of a big space. Ignition has recently split off from a larger company called Certus Solutions. So they're trying to really identify themselves within the data space and get into that data management and data insights specialization. Obviously, this is what everyone is really excited about and has been excited about for the last 10 years, but the hype is just growing and growing with AI and all the other things changing. Just how you can analyze information to drive insights, make sure that things are being utilized to their maximum performance, but also make sure that you're managing your responsibilities. So are you complying with all of the legal regulations out there? Are you managing your risk, etc.? So that data can be powerful, but it can also be scary, and breaches can happen.
Sticking with data engineers, we've actually got data engineer Indika Pasquale from automation company Warescape up next, who had some really interesting experiences when it came to getting information up front from organizations and clients that you might be working with, and some of the warning bells that might be ringing if you don't get that information up front.
Well, mostly when we go into a project or maybe a POC or we start something, even though the project is a very important thing, it may take to go over compliance, connections, infrastructure. It may take longer to get passwords and to get access than what the project is itself. I think it may not be the best symptom if your company takes longer to give you access than it will actually take to do the project, or if a lot of people have to sign for something that's allegedly not so dangerous. I think it's not the best of ideas. Whereas in the end, I mean, for most businesses, or your data is your core business. If you're something like a bank or an insurance company, or you're actually trying to move to a more data kind of oriented business as well. I don't know. Maybe you are, I don't know, like a car company, but you want to be more data driven. If you want to be more data driven, give data and the people that are working with data that kind of priority idea instead of leaving security compliance guys, because in the end, all those things, you will always be subject to the people that you're working with. If they do something stupid, it doesn't matter how much security you have. So that's something that's annoying sometimes with customers. Others are not. Others are registered very, very fast. So that's also like a good sign.
Data management is one of the fastest growing businesses in the world in terms of the number of people coming through and the impact that it has on society as a whole. I had a chance to sit down and talk again to Christoph Weinzierert from Scalefree about an event that they were putting on. And one of the things that he brought up was about young people coming through who have a fresh perspective and a fresh way of looking at things, raising questions from people who might have been in the industry for a while, and how much he encourages people to bring in a fresh perspective with the fresh blood that they're bringing into the industry.
They already live in a new world of new technologies, and when we have things like Snowflake, etc., right? And way more data than ever before, and different use cases. You have this, and the governance part becoming way more important now. So they actually have, I wouldn't say really different, but still, new requirements that they bring to the table, and they ask new questions about data vault. And that's super interesting. So it's not like if you found out about data vault 10 years ago, the main advantages were maybe a bit different than they are right now, right? So it's super interesting to get new people in to ask questions, like new questions, that obviously data vault can answer, but it's super interesting. And so I think the mix for those events, that what makes it great, right? Because you have people who actually have to think about like basic question they didn't think about for a long time. Then there may be discussions between people who are doing it for a long time. And then it becomes to get a real good discussion with actually new info, and everyone can learn. Then that's the great part, right? It's not just that only the new people learn, but in data world there's always a lot of solutions a lot of ways to have a valid model, for example. It doesn't need to be the same, right? So it gets super interesting, even if the people have a lot of experience. So
Shung Lan from Tech Data is a graduate of the very prestigious Carnegie Mellon University out of the United States. It's a university that's leading the forefront when it comes to AI technologies and data management in general, and has done for quite some time. So I was really curious to get his advice on how people can succeed within the industry. And his advice was actually really simple: stay ahead of new technology.
Data science is that time before generative AI is not many people talk AI like today. So you need work with very great, we'll say the talented or expertise. Most of them have highly degree like PhD. So they talk about this new technology, and also you want to talk this advanced edge technology with your customer to get their attention, to show them how they can use this new technology, new algorithm to resolve their business challenge. So I think that kind of become a job requirement. You have to be at the edge of the technology to resolve these business challenges.
Richard Harris is an Australian expert in data privacy. He's worked with big organisations and government around updating privacy protocols and ensuring that people's data is kept safe. He's got some really interesting advice here about learning from others' mistakes, with a great example as to just how simple it is to have human error come in and play a part in the mistakes that get made in these processes, and basically learning from what other people have done wrong.
I'm talking about when we see a breach. So a good example that I use quite often is Medibank. Everyone is familiar with the Medibank breach of a few years ago. In that case study, we know that the breach happened because someone had obtained username credentials to get into the Medibank system. That speaks to a level of human error because somebody would have to have taken steps to reveal that. Now, it was probably done through a sophisticated phishing exercise. But again, if that person had been properly trained, if there were other systems in place, policies and procedures, then maybe that wouldn't have happened. But it wasn't just the fact that the systems were breached through that manner. There was also a significant amount of past customers' data that was breached. Under the regulations, you are expected to delete information that you no longer need. So again, a very good argument that policies and procedures weren't being followed, or maybe they didn't exist, because that data really shouldn't have been available at that point. At the very least, it should have been archived or de-identified. And that's resulted in a very significant impact on Medibank. $250 million in their capital fund, additional, not to mention the close to a little over $100 million in remediation, 15% drop in their share price. But the big kicker is that there's now a class action lawsuit being mounted because people are stating that their privacy policy was saying that they were doing certain things that they clearly were not doing. And so, from an example of just how bad human error can result, Medibank's up there. But that's consistent across the board. Football Federation, DP World, Pareto Phone, the list kind of goes on, where when it comes down to it, people not following policies and procedures was the problem. World Economic Forum puts that the number at, I think, 93% of data breaches can be linked back to some form of human error. So when people talk about data privacy and they instantly go to cybersecurity, they're really missing they're only focusing on 1/3 of the equation. The other 2/3 are you need very robust policies and procedures in place, and you need a culture of privacy. You need all staff at all levels to be conscious of what the obligations are and how they should be met. So that's what I mean by human error. I do find that everyone agrees Yes, we need rules, we need policies and procedures because everybody else needs them because they can't be trusted. But I'm special and I don't need to follow. And that's human nature.
Lorenz Kindling is a principal architect consultant out of Scalefree in Europe. And his advice was actually really simple for people that are looking at starting into the industry, the sort of advice he'd give himself when he was a little bit younger. Look at ways to widen your horizon.
The first part is probably look a little bit abroad from what you learn from university. So mostly, especially in German universities, you learn like theoretical stuff and also maybe not old school, but you learn classic Inmin. You don't really look abroad what is out there. When I think back, when we talked with my professor about data lake, which nowadays is like a really, really common thing. Back then he was like, yeah, no, that's nothing. That's just a buzzword that's going out there. It's about data warehousing, data quality, where he's not wrong, right? But in general, I would say have a look outside what is out there. What are maybe some trends in technology right now? Yes, and then I think the other thing is to connect early and often. I think this is what the Data World Innovators community is all about, and especially in some tech fields, which are kind of specific, like Data World. When you meet some people, you will see really quickly that the world in tech is pretty small. So you get to know the people that work. So I think in Data World, it's probably like the best case to show it. If you start to learn, to get to know the people that work with Data Vault in different companies, that work with these automation tools, you really get to know like a broad community that you can learn from, that maybe can show you new opportunities. So I think this is something that you should try to do earlier as well. Try to connect with people and try to see what's out there.
James Hartwright, who's based out of Australia, who by his accent you should be able to pick up isn't originally from there, is the practicing manager of a company called Pragmaticians. He does a lot of training with people around data management and the skills that they can bring into that. And I asked him for the best piece of advice that he had to give to people who might be starting out on the industry. It's short and it's really simple, but it's a brilliant piece of advice.
And it's like, yeah, just go. If you see something that looks interesting, just go for it, because that thing of curiosity, enthusiasm, etc., has got me a long way in my journey, taking me around the world. So yeah, just go for it.
Finally, we've got Tim Kirschke. He's a BI consultant out of Europe, and he does a lot of touring around the place. He's worked remotely for the last couple of years because he can. So his advice was a really fun, interesting one to look at, because apparently he gets asked this question quite a bit. As always, try something new and don't overthink the problem that's in front of you.
I would say the first thing that comes to my mind is not think about stuff too long, especially if it comes to trying to figure out something new. So we have many people that start basically typically with learning Data Vault, for example. And it's all about doing the certification. They visit the 3-day bootcamp, and then they want to pass the exam. And I know from myself back then, it's very hard to understand. It's a lot to learn. And it comes much easier if you just implement or try to implement a Data Vault in a sample environment. So I would say recommendation would be trying to do things rather than trying to figure out things first. There are typically no scenarios where you can fail so bad that it's like in the end you shouldn't have tried something.
That's it with our guests so far. They've given us some great pieces of advice. The only thing I could ever consider adding to it is to make sure that you don't fall into one of the classic traps, the most famous of which is don't get involved in a land dispute in Asia. I think that's relevant. Maybe not. Maybe that's The Princess Bride. It's hard to keep track of these things. Look, seriously, these people have all worked in the industry and have all got really different perspectives. We all take that on board and bring that with us, our own perspectives and our own viewpoints. Some of this advice might not be applicable to you. Some of it might have been applicable to you a little bit too late, but Either way, it's fantastic to be able to sit down and see different perspectives and get different advice from people. And as always, you can take it on board, or you could choose to ignore it, or maybe it will help you or somebody else at some point in time in the future. Look, that's us for this week's episode. Thank you very much for joining me. Don't forget you can always go and join the Data Vault Innovators community. It's absolutely free. We've got some big stuff coming there soon. I can't really say more, but it'll be big and it's exciting, and we're working really hard on making that happen for you right now. But stay tuned. We'll get you up to date on that one. And also don't forget to like, share and subscribe with this video. Tell everybody out there about us, and let's see if we can grow the audience a little bit. Until next time, make sure you look after yourself, live long and prosper, and may the force be with you.